According to the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics, 47% of the population in Gaza Strip are children. If we speak about 2.2 million people inhabitants in Gaza Strip, we speak about 1 million people who are really children of the living people in Gaza. The question about the impact, let me get back to the point that you raised when you spoke about the Save the Children report. And I think that always the most important, let me say, finding that the report speak about, in my opinion, is that the feeling of safety among children. Because when you speak about 15 years of blockade, when you speak about decades of occupation, when you speak about 5 big offensives on Gaza Strip since the year 2008, I think the biggest question is, do you feel really safe when you live in Gaza Strip? One of the key findings is that 90% of the children living in Gaza Strip, they don't feel, or they feel less safe when they are away from their parents, The figure was 60% of 2018, and now it became 90%, which was few months just before the recent attacks. Emotional distress is 80%, as you mentioned, and on top of that is depression. On the other hand, if we look at the caregivers or at the parents who are the backbone or the cornerstone when it comes to offering support to children, we see another staggering, really, figure, which is that 96% of the parents report feeling unhappy and constantly anxious. And if you look into what could be the possibility or the reason for that anxiety or for being unhappy, you find that 2/3, 63% of caregivers feel that they are not useful or they are not able to overcome the difficulties. And why is that? Two main reasons. One is that parents are not really capable of offering safety and security in times of attacks, because we don't have shelters, we don't have means of feeling safe and secure. And the other point, when you speak about 53% or more than 50% of the population live under poverty line, then you speak about the difficulties that parents face in just providing simple needs of their children who go to schools. 53%, that means more than 500,000 children live under, in families living under poverty line. Can those parents really offer good stationery, for example, good clothing for their children's clothing, schooling, etc., etc.? So in GCMHP, we made a research in 2021, about 5 or 6 months after the May 2021 attacks. One of the findings was not really far from the findings of the Save the Children report. About 83% of the children had anxiety issues, 78.7% of children had problems with attention. 74.5% of children had symptoms of depression, 71.7% has sleep problems. So you hear about a mixture of really symptoms that are related to the ongoing chronicity of the difficulties, depression, anxiety, etc., etc. And you have some other children who resemble some kind of trauma-related issues, like sleeping problems, like problems with attention, with concentration, etc., etc. So these were the conditions of the children prior to the last few days attacks. So you can imagine how these symptoms were or have exacerbated. Sometimes people question the notion of 80%, that is the highest. Yes, it's the highest in the world. I'm really not that pessimistic that we had so many. The percentage is such a high one. But let's go back to 2014 when the UNICEF said that about 370,000 children, or 1/3 of the children living in Gaza Strip, they are in need for some psychological intervention. That figure really continued to be there. I think in 2018, we were talking about 1/4 or 1 in 4 children is in need for some psychological intervention. But of course, the needs increase and continue to be high. Let's keep in mind that it's not only that we talk about symptoms. We do not talk about, let me say, disorders. That's disorders is a different issue. You need to have a clinical setting in order to make the psychological assessment, the full assessment of the children in order to reach a diagnosis. So even if we are not talking about a disabled children or a disabling disease, we are continuing to speak about the suffering of those children and the families who host the children. Again, during the last 3 or 4 days when we had the recent attacks, again, the figures show that again about 1/4 of the casualties are really children, whether those who were killed or injured, about 1/3 to 1/4. That's the continuing staggering figure. More than 120 children, I think, were injured. More than 15 children were killed. Many of those children were cousins. They were members of the same family. Some of them passed away got killed with one of their parents. So the overall issue is that 15 years of blockade, for example, any child who is now 18-year-old or 17-year-old was exposed to 3 to 4 large-scale operations. Between those operations, you do not really have a period or a time of safety. As of now, for example, the ceasefire is there, but actually the drones are still in the sky. The threat that is still ongoing. We see what happens in West Bank yesterday, what happened in Nablus, for example. So it's all something that doesn't really bring a feeling of safety and security. It's something that keeps reminding people of the traumatic event and keeps natural healing processes, on hold, make our intervention on working with the children, with the victims, also a difficult one.
I would like to remind our audience that in 1991, Israel ratified the UN's Convention on the Rights of a Child, which stipulates that all children have the fundamental rights to life, survival, development, protection from violence, and an education that enables them to fulfill their potential. But clearly, Israel violates this convention day after day, year after year, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem. We know, for instance, that in Israel itself, Palestinian or Arab schools often receive almost 6 times less funding per child than schools for Jewish students, as they are ineligible for funding from Zionist institutions. They go on to face discrimination in job markets and also subject to Israel's 65 racist laws. In addition, over 5 million Palestinian refugees must rely on the UNRWA for aid living in the West Bank, in Gaza, and Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, with over 1 million children requiring humanitarian assistance. In the West Bank, Israel's apartheid subjects Palestinian children to discriminatory laws and practices. They are routinely denied the right to education when forced to wait at checkpoints. Their classes can be disrupted by Israeli military at any time. And according to the Defense for Children International in Palestine, each year, approximately 500 to 700 Palestinian children, some of them as young as 12 years old, are detained and prosecuted in Israeli military court system. This is common charge. The common charge against them is stone throwing.